we'd have like 12 people and we'd play 12-handed because we didn't know any different, right? And we'd gamble it up. We'd usually do winner take all because that's, like how it rolled back then. And the other kids' moms would joke that I had a summer job because I would always win. Because like me and like one other, maybe two other guys took it seriously, and like we like read, I can't remember what book it was, probably like Super System or some book like that. There was only a couple of books back then, so we got pretty good, and that kind of like sparked my interest. So then in high school, like my senior year, I started playing online a little bit back on Doyle's room.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a throwback, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I was coming home on like my lunch period, my off block, and grinding on Doyle's room, playing like I think there was like a $20 and $50 tournament. If I was like really running good, I'd play the $50 one, and ended up running it up to. Let me think here. I think I ran it up to like 5 grand
Oh wow.
from because I borrowed my dad's credit card and deposited like $50. I ran it up to like
Thanks, Dad.
five. Yeah, right. I ran it up to like 5 grand, which was a ton of money for me. Like I'm 17 years old,
Yeah, for sure.
and I end up busting it all in one session, playing like 10, 20, no limit.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I think I pulled off like $200, so I was like booking a win. But yeah, busted it all, and then that was like, I was totally hooked by then. So from there, uh, ended up dropping out of college. I had a baseball scholarship, dropped out of college, and at that point, I had like very little going on for me. So I decided to move across the country from. I grew up in Colorado, and I moved to the state of Washington and live
Cool.
with my dad. Yeah, I know, big move.
Yeah.
But what pulled me out there was the gambling age was 18 out there. So I lived with my dad and I started working at a casino. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to get into poker. I'll try working at a casino. So I got into the industry on the other side of it actually.
Hmm.
And even though I like tried to play a lot and tried to make playing work, I wasn't good enough. So yeah, I got into the casino industry as a dealer. And from there, kind of just was like in and out. Had some dealing jobs, ended up moving to the Seattle area, and kind of played poker on the side. I think a lot of people ask me like, what, how do I get into like playing for a living? I think really just play on the side is what I did, and I was able to, like run up bankrolls, run down bankrolls, get a job back at the casino. Kind of went in and out of money in my like 19 to 21. I was actually playing. I remember I was playing underage at the casinos in the Seattle area, the gambling age at the tribal casinos where the big games were, was 21. And I remember I got caught playing underage at 19, and they just kind of like shoo you out of the door because they don't
Yeah.
want to get in trouble. And I remember I just didn't go there for like 3 months, and then 3 months later I started going again, and no one noticed. So
Ah.
I played underage for like, gosh, about a year and a half there.
Oh wow.
Uh, yeah, and then turned 21, and finally could like go in there and laugh at all the floors that I was playing underage. That was fun. Yeah, so it kind of cut my teeth in the Seattle area, and then I guess it was probably like early 2000 or late 2000s, like 2009 ish. I moved back to Colorado because my grandma was not doing well. She had cancer and it was looking like she wasn't going to make it too long. So moved back to be with my mom, spent some time with grandma. And really, there's just not much poker in Colorado.
No.
So yeah, I kind of gave up playing poker for the most part. Kind of like ran out of a bankroll, just had living expenses. So just worked in the casino industry up there. There are casinos there. There's just not really poker games.
Right. And this is
So
before the HBT was out there, right? Like a couple times a year.
they had the HPT a couple times a year, but you can't survive on a couple
No, of
tournaments
course
a
not.
year.
It's not a living. Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked in the casinos, which was cool. Like casino job's a pretty fun job. Definitely got me by. I ended up meeting my wife, who I'd known, well, meeting back up with my wife, who I'd known for years. So like I traded playing poker for a living for a wife, which was a darn good trade.
Trading up.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we got married, and I, had to work and get her through school and just pay the bills. So poker really like was on the back burner for a long time,
Mm.
and I think that was a good thing, really. It kind of humbled me, brought me down to earth a little bit, tamed my ambition in a good and healthy way. Um, so fortunately, my wife did graduate from college, and I was kind of getting to the miserable point at working at a casino. So she was like, "What do you want to do, like with your life, with your career?" And I was like, "I want to get back to playing poker for a living." So she was very gracious and was willing to sell our house, move across country to the East Coast, where there's a couple new poker markets like Maryland, the one I'm in right now. And we sold our house, and I was like, "Boom! I got a bankroll," and I've been working that bankroll up and playing bigger games than I ever thought I would, really.
Yeah,
So,
I that's encouraging to hear because I'm literally in my last year of my wife finishing school. We've kind of gone through the same thing, and
mm,
I had to put poker to the side for a couple years back when cash outs were heading to your local Walgreens and getting a MoneyGram transfer from Dice Jeff Muska Safi from like some third world country. So like it's been a grind for us too, and like I've wanted to get back to that. And it's really cool when you have that wife that does support poker and everything. So what let me ask you this, like what was the breakthrough point for you in terms of your poker growth, right? Like you started
mhm.
out and you had all these like ups and downs with the bankroll, and obviously now you're doing really really well. Like what was the turning point where you started to really like get that feeling of, hey, I could be great at this game, like I can really do some special things in this game? Like when did it start to turn for you?
Well, I always thought I thought I was capable when I was playing in Seattle. I mean, I'd been a winning player for many years before, like my wife was like, I'm done with school. Let's pursue your passion now. So like have had a winning, been a winning player for many, many years before my last decision to go pro. Like I've quote unquote gone pro a number of times where
Yeah,
I like, I was like, take me off the schedule at work, at my dealing job, because I'm just going to play cards. And I'd done that numerous times and with varied success, like ran up a bankroll and played poker for 6 months and then ran down a bankroll because I was 21 years old and irresponsible.
sure.
So, yeah, but I've been a winning player for quite a while. I would say, yeah, in the Seattle area, when I really started seeing like large growth in my poker game and really, I guess just putting in a lot of study time. I remember like literally falling asleep in front of my computer watching card runners training videos, like multiple nights a week, trying to get better. And that was really when I was like, wow, there's so much to this game,
Mm.
and like the ceiling is so high at it that I really thought I had a pretty good shot. But it wasn't until I got kind of older and more mature that I think I was more capable of doing a sustainable long term profession.
Nice. You missed a key part of your poker story though that I'm kind of surprised you didn't bring up. It's a little jewelry.
Ah,
A little jewelry. What? I mean,
yes.
for so many of us that would like have. I mean, some of us have realistic goals of doing that. Some of us have far fetched dreams of doing it. Some of us say, what? Tell us. Just walk us through that whole experience. What's it like? What was the journey like? What was the tournament like?
Mm.
And yeah, like let us live through you here for a second on that.
All right. So after we moved out to Maryland, I went on this like 6 month, like sort of like break even-ish downswing where I think I lost about $20,000 playing 2-5 over 6 months. It was just feeling like super discouraged, like just moved out here to play poker for a living, go on this downswing. And then in January, or February, I went to LAPC. This was like 3 years ago. I went to the LAPC in LA. And I was like, man, if things don't start working out here, I'm going to have to like consider, am I doing the right thing? and luckily did well in a tournament out there, won like 30,000 or something. So I was like, oh sweet, okay, I'm in a good spot, I'm feeling better. And then I went to the World Series that year, and sure enough, went on a deep run in a 1K no limit event. And long story short, this was when I was also like getting into streaming and stuff, which was really fun. And long story short, I ended up shipping a 1K World Series poker bracelet for $319,000, which, like I've been playing poker for so long at this point, maybe not professionally, but semi-professionally. And like the dream of winning a bracelet was like so alive when I was younger. And then I got to this place where I'm like pretty steadily playing for a living, and I'm like, I'm probably never going to win a bracelet. Sure enough, I bang one off. It was, I mean, it's a dream. I'm at this point, I don't expect to ever win one again. It's like, I don't know. It's such a unicorn thing. Yeah.
Was the pressure like? I mean, you've played in a lot of different tournaments and you've had deep runs and everything. Of course, was the pressure higher, knowing like that the bracelet was at stake? Especially when you got to the final like two. Like, did you feel like, oh my god, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity? Like, I got to make it count, or were you just kind of like in the zone and just like focused and dialed in?
Yeah, for me, when I'm playing a tournament, I just get like caught up in it. To this day, like when I was at the Borgata last week, I had a deep run as well. And honestly, like until day 4, I never even looked at what first place was, because I was just like, I'm just so wrapped up in like doing the best I can right now, and trying to stay focused, that I kind of just leave all the peripheral stuff for later. For better or worse, sometimes I think that's to my detriment when I am not looking as closely at payout jumps and stuff like that. But yeah, I just get so immersed in it that I really don't take stock of, man, I was playing for a World Series poker bracelet.
Hmm. So what? Fast forwarding back to the Maryland thing, there are a lot of wild poker scenes out there. A lot of great places to, kind of make home base. And I mean, I'm probably still 4 to 5 years away, realistically, from getting to do the move, like physically moving.
Mm.
But I think about it all the time. Like, what made you choose Maryland? Out of curiosity, out of all the different places, like what kind of gave you the vibe? Like, that's where we want to go and kind of take on this poker career.
So at the time, this was, gosh, a little over 3 years ago at this point. But Maryland casinos like officially opened for business. I think it was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. So it was pretty new. It was a pretty new market, and it's a fairly affluent area. So you combine the two, an affluent area and a new market where, there was previously no casinos within a couple hours drive. Most people are like having to go to Atlantic City or like, out of the state to play some poker. You have a lot of pretty fresh new players, pretty affluent areas. So I think little pockets like that are really viable options, at least for like 5 to 10 years where the games will be really good. Similarly, I'm going to be moving to the Boston area this summer because they're opening up a Wynn property
Mm.
like downtown Boston, and there's no casinos within hour and a half or 2 hour drive. It's like very affluent area. The Boston area is one of the richest parts of the nation. So I think it's going to be like, it's like you're capturing almost like a mini poker boom with
Right.
these like local casinos. So yeah, that would be my advice if that's possible. Kind of find your little pocket, your little gold mine.
Interesting. So, you I take it like in terms of wait. So let me back up. How far is Boston from where you are now? Like that's
It's quite a ways, probably a 6 hour drive.
okay. So this is gonna be quite a move then in terms of where you're going. So like in that case, then I guess, is there any desire as the legal landscape changes to live somewhere where, like let's just say Stars comes to a state nearby? Like, do you have any desire at
Mm.
some point to be somewhere where you can tap into the Poker Stars market, or are you just like loving live so much that it doesn't really matter or factor into the decision?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. Uh, and it's something I've considered like when deciding where to move. The thing is, online poker, especially regulated one, they're like often ring fenced to certain states, or maybe they have a compact with a couple states. And it's really just pretty limited in terms of like the ceiling is really low. Even if I lived in, say, New Jersey, which is one of the better markets because they have a compact with a couple states, how much money can I really make playing online in New Jersey? You know,
Right.
like not very much. So really, it's kind of like a secondary thing. It would be nice. It'd be nice if I could just fire up my like PokerStars New Jersey and play a tournament every once in a while. But really, what's driving my income is live cash games. So
Yeah.
I think that has to be the priority. Um, if you're doing it for a living, if you're doing it casually or whatever, or on the side, you have a good job, man, go, consider whatever you want to play.
For sure, for sure. All right, I got a couple. I got a couple selfish questions. As a little bit of a fanboy here, so bear with
All
me as
right.
I go through things. These are just things I want to pick your brain on personally. I don't really care whether the audience wants to know or not. So on the tournament scene, so you definitely play some poker tournaments. Um, and you I don't know what percentage of your schedule it is. I mean, it seems like a decent percentage of your schedule right now because we've gotten to see you at PCA, we've gotten to see you at the Borgata. How do you decide what tournaments you want to play? Like how do you decide what you're going to target, when you're going to go, what gives a tournament value? I This excites me because, again, like with my wife graduating next year's going to be the first year where my bankroll doesn't have life rake, and so like I'm actually going to have options, and so I'm just kind of curious to hear your thought process. I mean, there's so many options these days in the live scene. Like how do you narrow them down? How do you go through that thought process and decide what you want to attack?
Mm. Yeah, good question. For me, because I play a lot of cash games, I have cash games available. Like, I don't have to play tournaments, so I really get to be pretty choosy. I typically just like if there's a local one that's a good one. By a good one, I mean like higher buy-in, like 1,500 or better, or higher buy-in. Then I'll definitely play that because it's like in my backyard. It's kind of nice to just mix it up and play a tournament, get off the cash grind for a couple days. So if it's in my backyard and close, maybe a couple hour drive like Borgata's, probably 3 hour drive. Then by all means, yeah, I'll just go play a tournament. It sounds fun if it works with the schedule and stuff. But if I'm gonna go for a trip like to PCA, that was very much like my wife came with me for a week. It was like a vacation, a little poker vacation.
Sure.
So I do like sometimes I'll go to LA. My best friend lives in LA, and I'll like go visit him for a couple days, go play a poker tournament, try to kind of coordinate the two. So I usually end up tacking something onto the poker tournament, which makes it a lot more enjoyable and a lot less like a work trip.
Do you find the transition between cash and MTTs hard, or is it pretty simple for you at this point in terms of going back and forth between the two formats?
Yeah, I don't mind it really much at all. I would say if anything, transitioning back to cash games might be a little harder than transitioning to term. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess I don't really have too much issue with it. Um, yeah, I kind of just get in my mindset of like tournament mode versus cash mode. Mostly it's just like strategical adjustments of most cash games I play super deep, whereas tournaments you're typically like 30 to 100 blinds deep.
Right.
So it's just a lot of strategic adjustments and opening ranges and stuff. But yeah, it's not too bad.
Nice. Ship Don't Die had a question in chat. He wants to know if it is feasible to make a living one tabling, MTTs and cash live, if that's a doable thing. I assume the answer is yes. Seems like you're doing all right.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing you got to remember about this is the best analogy I've heard is when you're playing live, there can only be one of each person at a table. So there's only so many winning players, and they can't like. Whereas when you're playing online, they can just multiply themselves. Everyone can multi-table. The best players are all playing at six tables. The recreational players usually are playing at one or two. So just like yeah, the ratios of winning players versus losing players is much more favorable. Typically, you just people tend to play worse live. It's like live is like a time machine, a poker time machine. You just like automatically go back 5 years in
Yeah.
terms of skill level. It's very, very, very beatable. It's probably going to consistently remain the most beatable.
Okay. So let me ask you about success for a little bit. And again, like this is me picking your brain because I feel like you're like a I don't want to say X amount of years ahead of me because then I'm like it's too I don't know optimistic or exact or whatever. But you're a few steps ahead of me in the journey, right? You've got your wife through school. You're in a place where you can truly dedicate on your career and everything. Like as you start to be successful and as you start to move up into stakes and you start to add zeros to the end of buy-ins and cashes and prizes, like how do things change? Like I've always looked at that and wondered if like does some of the drive go away as someone like me who's been grinding out bill money for several years, like when you get to the point where you start to move up in stakes, is it harder to push yourself, or is the drive even bigger because now there's more at stake? And like same with the swings, the up and down swings. You talk about down swings. I've seen some of your tweets where it's like, I lost $20,000 on this hand or whatever. Like to me that would like I would like go in the fetal position for a while and like weep, like so like just kind of talk through like as you start to move up, like what changes? Do you have more drive, less drive? Is it more pressure, less pressure? Like what's that like?
So yeah, good big question. So I would say as you add more zeros to things, it's not that big of a deal. You kind of become immune to the numbers, like whether the blinds are 5 and 10 or 50 and 100, like it's just a poker game. Now, the thing about motivation that I found personally, this might be different for me than it is other people, is when I was kind of coming up in games, so I was playing like 2-5, shot taking 5-10, and then all of a sudden I'm like playing 5-10 on the regular and trying to play 10-25, trying to play bigger. I was very, very motivated to get better because I had this goal, like I wanna be able to be consistently beating 5-10. I want to be able to shot take 10-25. I want to be able to be like playing well, and I think having an edge against the regs. And I had more achievable goals. Whereas when I kind of like got to the top, which was like playing like 10-25 no limit, being able to play the bigger games 25-50, 50-100 when they ran, all of a sudden I really didn't have much motivation to get better because I was kind of like already beating the biggest games. So yeah, I would say once I kind of got to the top, quote unquote top, the top of my local poker scene, I definitely lost some motivation. So it's hard to be self-motivated when you're kind of, sounds maybe conceited to say, but when you're at the top, it's hard to be motivated.
Sure.
But that's not to say that I couldn't find bigger games other places and have bigger and better things. It's just I don't have like a reachable, like tangible goal. So that's been hard for me.
That makes sense. Have you had any like poker coaches along the way that have had a big impact to your game, or has most of your study just been like self-taught, going out on the internet and finding resources and absorbing them?
Mostly self-taught. I have gotten coaching from Assassinato, Alex Fitzgerald. He's worked a little bit with me. I actually still have some like unused lessons that I've already paid for. I got to use. I think he's a good coach. But I'm mostly self-taught. I think I get the most out of going through my own hands with some tools, some solvers, some whatever, like Flopzilla or something, whatever tool I want to use, and really just breaking it down for myself and kind of getting out what I can out of it. I think that's where I find the most benefit. Back in the day, I used to just grind really hard on training videos, and I think that had its place when I really didn't have as much of a starting point of where to study, what to study. But I really think those using tools and being able to use them yourself is a really big benefit. So just like learning how to learn is really big in poker.
For sure, for sure. What? So, give us an idea of like what is the scene like when you talk about like a 2550 or a 5100 cash game? I mean, we've got some crushers in chat in terms of tournaments. We've kind of got a feel for like what the high stakes scene looks like, online versus mid stakes versus low stakes. Low stakes, you're just playing your ABC game. You're not bluffing a lot. Like mid stakes, you start to throw some bluffs in. You get to the high stakes, and you get in some really cool things in terms of people oversizing bets on the pot and like really really polarizing your ranges and like it gets to an extreme level. Like what's it like at a 5100 game? Are you seeing some really next level poker? Is it like are you still kind of playing a standard game? Like what, just kind of describe that scene to us.
So it's very interesting because uh, if if you're in a casino and a big game is running, it's usually running because it's got a reason to be running. So either there's someone in the game that's good action, or someone organized a game, or the person that was good action just left and now the game's kind of just like on its last leg, or people are like there's some regs that are stuck in just gambling or something. But typically games run around a couple recreational players that are there. So it's interesting. You're playing the biggest game, but you have one or two usually inexperienced players in there, or less skilled players that everyone's kind of like trying to play pots with that person.
Right.
So while you're playing the biggest game and playing against some very capable people, everyone's just like trying to exploit the weaker player, trying to play pots against a weaker player. Um, but yeah, I mean it's unavoidable that you're going to battle the regs. That guy's not in every single hand. Um, so you definitely have to play against the regs. There's going to be a lot of good regs, typically, unless you're in an organized game, which is a whole nother story. So I guess, yeah, the big difference is you're going to have to play against other good regs, and you're going to have a good game plan and not let them just crush you. Like, it's not like 2-5 where you can just avoid playing with the good players. Like a 2-5 table, it's like, oh, darn it, I have two other good players on my table. I guess I'll just try to avoid pots with them. It's like, no, you're playing with like probably two recreational players, and then like all other very good, very competent players, and you just have to deal with it. Like, you have to play pots with them. You have to fight for pots. You have to fight for your equity. You got to try to deny their equity. And yeah, you'll see some weird stuff like overbets that people are actually using reasonable strategies. They're not just like doing it always with the nuts or whatever.
Right. Very
So
cool.
yeah, it's a bit of a cat and mouse thing because it varies so much from game to game.
I would think it'd be kind of a different style of poker because the more we exploit people, the more exploitable we are, and so you're in this like, where's the balance between the two, right? Like, how much do I want to stick my head out to try and get in a pot with this guy, knowing the people behind me? And I gotta imagine like the seat change button is like the stone cold nuts when you're in a game like that, right?
Mm.
Like trying to get that spot on the left side of the Rex. And
You know what's crazy is that there's like an unwritten rule amongst the regs that are like uh in the game every day. They know that like you just don't see change because it looks terrible. You don't want everyone just hopping around seats. So there's kind of just an understanding, at least in this market. I think it's different. Like, for example, in LA, it's just like cutthroat. People just don't care. They just do whatever is best for them. But out here, at least, it's been really pleasant in that the regs know that like we don't seat hop to try to get position on the fish. We just kind of like, this is our seat, and the recreational players can like hop around as they see fit, and that's fine. So in that way, we do have a pretty good group of regulars out here that try to make it pleasant and not like as predatory.
for sure. Gilbert's got a question for you. He says, how much does Sadie, quiet, my dogs. How much does playing with whole cam impact your decisions, and do you try and monitor others at the table, since presumably like others are aware of it, they've got the little 30-minute delay and whatnot?
Mm. Yeah, so my only experience with that was I played on Live at the Bike where they are on like 30-minute delay or something. And I really just didn't worry about it. Like, you're playing one session with someone. I could see if you're like day 4 of the main event and you're going to play 3 more days with someone, it could matter. But really, if you're playing one day with someone, there's only so much adjustment you can do. I just don't worry about it. I will have like when I was at PCA on the feature table, a guy that bought like 1% of me or 2% of me, I was like, hey dude, if there's like some crazy hand, just send it to me. But I'm really not looking. There's only so many adjustments you can make in a one session time frame.
That makes sense. What about the Vegas scene? Like, I assume since you've been out there for the World Series, obviously people talk about the cash games out there, and there's literally a billion cash games to choose from. Have you, like, when you're out there in the summer, do you get into that? And like, how in the heck do you even like break down where to go, where to play? Like, how do you even like absorb all that?
Mm. I'm really bad when I go to Vegas for the World Series. I just can't help myself. I have to play tournaments. Even years I've gone and I'm like, I'm finally gonna do it. I'm gonna play all cash games this year, and then I'm gonna play the World Series main event. And then I get out there and I'm like, but all my friends are deep in tournaments. And I'm like, I just
Right.
want to do it. I want to fire every tournament. So I do have friends that play cash during the World Series, and I've heard the last couple of years that cash games have been pretty good to really good. So I think it's definitely a viable option. I just, man, it's like the one time a year where I'm just like, I'm just gonna play whatever I want, and I play a bunch of tournaments.
So how long do you generally go out to Vegas for? Are you out there for the entire thing, or do you kind of like how do you decide?
So I've done anywhere from going out for a weekend to going out for the entire thing. The entire thing is way too much for me. I got so burned out the year I did that. So I'll probably never do that again. Typically, I go for like 5 to 7 days on the front or mid end, and then I come back home, and then I'll go back out to Vegas for about a week for the main event. That's been a pretty consistent, like, haven't gotten too burned out, felt good about it. This year, though, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be moving to Boston this summer. So I think I'm literally just going to go for the main event because we're going to be moving around that time.
Yeah, moves are tough. I've been there. It's hard to navigate everything else, and even when you plan it out to the nth degree, things still go wrong, and
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to do. Um, okay, cool. So let's talk about like people you've played with. I mean, you've been around some big games. Like, who's the coolest person you've ever played with? Pro, otherwise, like could be a celebrity. Like, what's kind of one of the
Mhm.
coolest experiences you've had in terms of people you've met at the poker tables?
I gotta say, playing with Phil Hellmuth is just everything you'd expect it to be. Like he is exactly like he's on TV. Whether you're playing cash game tournament, it doesn't matter. Like that's genuinely just Phil. So I've enjoyed playing. I played with Phil like 3 or 4 times, and oh my god, he is he is just a hoot. Like he entertains everyone. He's a big personality. He's fun to play with. It's like something you can go tell your friends about that know nothing about poker, and they're like, "You played with Phil Hellmuth?" Man, that yeah, those are probably my favorite person to play with for sure, Hellmuth.
So I got a follow up question. I got to ask you then because with my friends, there's two schools of thought. School of thought one is that Phil is a really brilliant business guy, and everything he does is to build this image and it's to build his business. Like he's
Mm,
really knows what he's doing. And then there's the other school of thought, which he's just the game has kind of passed him by, and he's just kind of an egomaniac, and like who he is who he is. Which school do you think he's in? Like, is he really smart and this is like an act, or is this is Phil?
So I used to think he was all an act until I like met him in person and played with him, and it is just so clear that it's genuine. And actually, I had him on my podcast, and we talked about. I was surprised he opened up so much. His like demeanor at the table and that fiercely competitive side of him actually comes from his childhood. He was I think he was the youngest sibling, and his siblings would always beat him at everything, and the only thing he could win at was like board games and card games. And that like became like out of his insecurity bred this like competitive, fiercely competitive part of him that always wanted to win and be like validated in card games. So I was really, I mean, it makes a lot of, I would kind of suspect something like that, but it's really cool to hear him open up about it. But yeah, I think it's totally genuine. And, as much as I would kind of agree that the game has passed him by, like he still does something so well that he's able to compete
Yeah.
in tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I was watching some of the stuff he was doing at the PCA, and there's definitely There's definitely some things he does that are just like, oh my gosh, like you see it and you're just like, it's so painful to watch. But at the same time, like you're right, like he's very selectively good at some things, and I think he's also so. Well, I mean, honestly, now unorthodox that I think some people don't respond to it well, and so it kind of allows him to exploit in some ways that normally people shouldn't be able to exploit. I see the Star Wars shirt. I assume you're a fan.
Big fan.
Okay,
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm a big fan. I wouldn't put myself in the like reading the comic books or some of the alternate canon stuff fan, but
Oh,
like
me either.
I
Yeah.
love the movies. So I personally thought The Last Jedi was awesome. I loved it. I thought it was a phenomenal movie. I thought it had some twists. I thought it was different. The only complaint I had about the movie was we didn't get an epic Luke Skywalker battle. That was the only thing. Like the Luke Skywalker battle
Mm.
at the end was lame. But other than that, I loved the movie. It got so much bad flack. What were your thoughts on The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and what are you looking forward to in the ninth movie?
I have gone into the like new Star Wars franchise with like very little expectations and been pleasantly surprised with every movie that's come out. I think they've done a good job on all of them. Now, granted, I'm like you, I haven't read like the books or anything. I'm just like a Star Wars like movie kind of like junkie. I love the movies. Um so yeah, I thought they were awesome. They haven't done put out a bad movie yet. I think the worst one they've actually done so far was the Han Solo one, and that was just because I
Yeah.
was like, I wanted to learn more about Han, not go on this like quest. Um, but yeah. I mean, I was so worried when Disney bought Star Wars too. I was like, oh my gosh, don't make this like a kiddie franchise or something.
Right.
But it's been epic, man. They've done a really good job. Yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I'm constantly looking for like updates on when the next trailer is going to be out, and sounds like it's going to be April, so we got a little bit of a wait. But yeah, I'm super excited. Blazer8 asks, how do you sleep playing in the big events when your brain never shuts down?
Mm. Yeah, it really depends. Like this last one when I was at Borgata, I was actually able to just conk out right when I got to my room, and part of it was that we played like 12 plus hour days of poker where I was just exhausted and fortunately able to fall asleep. But yeah, I usually bring a book with me. Books are, I think, a good thing for my brain to like. I'll start reading and I'll get like 5 pages in, my eyes get tired, and it kind of puts me to sleep. So having some kind of bed routine would probably be helpful. I'm not terribly good at that. I just happen to be reading Game of Thrones right now, so so that helped. Um, yeah, that can definitely be tough. Even one of the days I was out at Borgata, for some reason my body woke up at like 7:30 a.m. and I was like, "What the heck?" And luckily fell back asleep. But it can be tough, man. Long days, your brain's just like firing on all cylinders, and you got to go to bed. Yeah, I guess a bed routine is probably good.
Yeah.
But like, I'm so irresponsible. I'm the wrong person to ask on a lot of this stuff. I just kind of wing it. I don't know.
I love the honesty. I missed a question from Alpha Versus. Wants to know, says he's been following you for a long time. Wants to know when you'll be streaming again. Misses the cross between grinding and your Christian messages.
Oh, thanks, bro. Yeah, I miss you too, Alpha. I miss all my stream buddies. But unfortunately, like streaming just is on back burner. It's really not a priority. I don't have enough time to play online poker. Live poker is just kind of where I'm making the money. So unfortunately, I don't really have any plans to return to streaming or anything. I've done like this is my second of three podcasts this week. And I think I'm going to fire up my own podcast pretty soon again. So I'll at least get you guys that. But I don't
Nice.
really have any plans to get back on the stream grind.
I get it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it would be much harder for me if I had a casino in my backyard, but I don't. So it makes it's a little bit more palatable for me given my poker options. What's the biggest what's your worst bad beat story, and how did you deal with it? How did you cope with it? How did you get past it?
Hmm. Worst bad beat story. I actually had one really recently, and like emotionally, it wasn't that bad. This is my like, but this is probably one of my worst beats. Is I'll give a little hand history. Essentially, I had ace jack of clubs, called a raise, a reg behind me on the button called. I flop a flush draw. It comes like 9, 8, 5, 4, 8, 5, 4, 2 clubs, 5, 4 clubs. Turn 7 of clubs. He raises flop. I call. Turn 7 of clubs. So I make nut flush. I just lead right into him. And anyway, I bet river. He jams on river, and I've still got the nut flush. And I'm just like, I lose to a straight flush here. And sure enough, I call, and he has 6 or 8 clubs. And we were playing a pretty big game. The pot was about $16,000 pot. That one was probably one of the nastiest beats I've ever taken. Nut flush against a straight flush in a 16K pot. And that, but emotionally it didn't feel that bad. I was just like, it's a cooler. It hurts a little more because it's for 16,000, but I've lost bigger pots, So I definitely had to call it a session. I was like, I got to get out of here.
I was going to say, like, how do you, because the one thing I've struggled with, I've tried to get better at cash anytime I'm playing live more regularly, because Dylan, stop. One, if live or online poker ever completely goes away, that's going to have to be my fallback. And two, I always felt like if I had a good cash game presence, then it allows me to fill in and make my trips more efficient and whatnot. But the struggle I've always had is like when you lose a big pot in like tournaments. You bust a tournament in a bad way, okay, you lose $1,000 buy-in. The next tournament you can win 50 grand. So like it's right. Not like this feeling of like but like cash, if you lose like a buy-in, now it's like I gotta grind an entire buy-in back just to get back to where I was. And like mentally for me that's really hard because it's this place of like, oh my god, I feel like I'm so far away and I gotta play poker for so long and everything needs to go right. And if you lose a couple buy-ins, you just say you run really bad over a couple series, it's like you just feel like you're, this long journey away from where you were and the potential isn't there. And so it's really, so like, how do you, I like to hear that you quit the session. Like that seems like it would be good advice, just like you might need to take a day and stuff, but like, how do you deal with that, that aspect of it, especially in cash games?
Yeah. Funny you mentioned quitting a session. So I think both approaches should be done in some measure. Like take a bad beat, you decide, man, I'm done for the day, I quit. But I also think that you should, if that's kind of your MO is to just like you lose a big hand, you're out for the day. I think you should also try to just push through, because one way to get better at like mental game and tilt management is to just force yourself to play through it. Because I mean, it might get you a little bit on tilt or whatever, but if you get better at playing through that, you're going to be better at dealing with that and kind of like flexing that mental game muscle.
I like that.
Yeah, so playing through it when you can, I think is good. Also just zoom out, like it's easy to look at our graph and go like, look at the 1 day graph and watch it go straight to the ground. But then you zoom out to a week and you're like, oh, it was up and then it was down and then I finished on down. And then you zoom out to the year and you're like, man, this sucker's going up. What am I worried about? I'm down a couple buy-ins. So I think perspective is important. I think if we're talking about just like how do you deal with this stuff, matters of faith is important. Usually if I lose a nasty one or if I'm just in a bad mood, I'll try to pray and kind of refocus and give some perspective there in that like this doesn't define me, even though as a man I struggle with that a lot because I think men have a propensity to be identify themselves by their job or their work. So I definitely have to step back and be like, this isn't gonna make me or break me,
Sure. Yeah, and I think even especially like as family guys, like we have a tendency to want to like provide, and so there's some. I was talking to Snost about this the other day. There's some kind of weird thing where when we're struggling on the poker tables or we're in a downswing or things going well, like we feel like we're failing as providers sometimes. Like we're not doing our part, or we're creating extra pressure on the family, and I know that like that's something I've always struggled with, and so it's kind of refreshing to hear this idea of like having the big picture perspective versus having the laser focus on things. How so you bring up the faith thing, like how we talked to PGT about this too, like how does that marry like when you get into these higher stakes, and like how have people reacted to who you are, what you stand for? Do you get a lot of questions at the poker tables? Does it even come up? Does how has that been?
I mean, it's a mixed bag. I do get a lot. I get a lot of pushback. I probably get more hate and abuse for my faith than for anything else in regards to like poker. And that's fine. Part of the reason is because I'm very open about it. I'm very vocal about it. And, the gospel is a divisive thing. You have Jesus who says, like, I'm going to abolish this law of yours. And he gives this very scandalous thing called grace. And that doesn't add up. And it is very scandalous. So I do get a lot of pushback for it from the poker community, which is fine. Some of it merited, some of it just venomous. And yeah, but as much pushback as I get, I also get a lot of encouragement from people. There is a Christian population in the poker community, so I found a lot of brothers and sisters in the community too, which has been very encouraging. I don't really know where I was going with that. What was the other part of your question?
Well, just kind of how you handle it, how you react to it, and whatnot.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I try to do it in a way that's I guess I'm not trying to make a big scene out of it, but I'm willing to engage in it. Like I'll talk about Jesus at a poker table. I know it's like one of those taboo things, like don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, but like, things come up at a poker table, and I'm willing to engage in it. And as long as it's a productive conversation, if people just want to like start bashing religion or bashing Jesus, like, I'll probably just step out of the conversation. Same as I would with people are talking politics, and I'm just like, if it's not going to be a beneficial conversation, I won't engage in it. But at the same time, I want to be I guess erring on the side of talking about Jesus. You can't go too wrong with that.
Dang it, dude! I literally the next half of this interview was all about building a wall. I now I don't know what to I don't know what to talk about now. I'm kind of uncomfortable. But yeah, no, I like it. It honestly, like my experience is like people are honestly more positive than negative. I think in where I've been, as long as you're not like, I think people are scared to be preached at. It's like, oh, he's gonna convert me. He's gonna preach at me. He's gonna tell me all the things I'm doing wrong, and like it's not even on that level. And I think that's just because people have had so many bad experiences. But I love you calling it scandalous. I think that's kind of a cool it's kind of a cool term. I've never heard that term used. It's probably in some really cool book that I probably should have read, but I like that. It's a good analogy. I think it's a very accurate analogy. Switching gears really quick, Blazer O, I didn't want to miss his question, asked if you think online poker will ever get back to the 2005 days.
Ever? Maybe. Anytime soon? Definitely not. If the United States is going like state by state, if you're talking about in the States, that is, like in Europe and stuff, online poker is doing fine. But in the United States, it's pretty clear that we're going like state by state, small compacts. Maybe down the road we'll get some federal legislation, but it doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's I want to be optimistic, and I do think things are going to progress, but I guess the best way I could say it is it's out of our control. And so we're kind of forced to just kind of go with the tide as it goes. But I'm also somewhat grateful that we have anything at all. Like, I mean, 5 years ago, again, like it was like it wasn't even a possible thing, and it's not ideal. It's certainly not anywhere close to ideal, but it's better than it was. Like, we have a landscape of some sort that you have to be smart about, and that kind of probably is a good spot to transition. Well, before I transition, do you need a break? Do you want a break?
I'm good to keep going if you want to keep going.
Yeah, we'll keep going then.
It's gonna blow my nose.
Yeah, go for it. PGT says, personally, I get more pushback from Christians about me playing poker than I do poker players mad about my faith. Be interested to hear Chase's response to Christians who question what he's doing. So, the guys that tell you you're a heathen, you're going to hell, you're a gambler, you're stealing people's money, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I'd say I get a fair amount from both. I would say that Christian on Christian violence, or at least proclaiming Christians, does take on a different level of hurt, because like, gosh, you're supposed to be my brother in Christ, so I think it cuts a little deeper for sure. But yeah, I get that a lot. And the thing is, I try to remember is it's really not like, it's not entirely unmerited. There's been a lot of people that have been hurt by gambling. there's a lot of people's lives that have been torn up by it. So, you know, most of the time it's just like they've had a bad experience with it, or, um, sometimes it's just they're very on the religious side instead of on the biblical side. Yeah. So,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
there's a
they're just kind
difference.
of like operating out of their rule book that they've been given instead of out of the real rule book of the Bible. So, yeah, it tends to be, I think, when it's Christian on Christian, a Christian attacking me, is they're just ignorant or they know someone that's gotten hurt. So it can be hard though. I mean, yeah.
I like the fact that you've got a balanced perspective and that you can see that there's two sides to it, right? It's not just people who are naive making I like to call it spiritual insecurity, like they're insecure about their own faith and so they lash out on anything they can say is wrong type things. But also to see that there are people that have been wounded and have had bad things happen, and so they're coming from a place of hurt, a place of vulnerability. It's really cool to see that you understand and see both sides of that. And I mean, honestly, like everything in the world has this kind of like good and bad side to it, right? I mean, it's almost like if you work at McDonald's and you're forking out Big Macs to the same person every day, and you see that you're not helping on that front. I mean, there's things that we do that, like, I think it's impossible to be associated with things that aren't bad. Like, there's going to be, no matter what you do, no matter what job you're in, any type of business or industry has things about it that are negative, but at the same time, we can bring more good and more positive than the negative. And when you look at the scale, it's slanted in a much more positive way. So, you talk more than you're 31. You're well above your years in terms of your wisdom.
Thanks, bro.
Matt Moreland's got a question for you. He says, at what point did you realize you could play poker for a living?
Um, I think from a pretty young age, I realized it was possible. Once I was a winning player, essentially. So that was fairly early on for me. Back in the day, it was much easier to be a winner. But really, yeah, once I saw that I was a winning player, or at least saw a path to it, I was kind of had that dream and thought that could be a reality. I would say it never really came into focus until as like a tangible thing until when I was in Seattle, and I was like, wow, I'm making more playing than I am at my day job dealing cards. That was when it was really like, okay, like it's go time. Let's give it a shot. But
Yeah,
I think as long as you're a winner, it's possible.
for sure. Um, so we talked about the online landscape, and it was interesting because I heard about the PPP thing on 2+2, and then it wasn't. I don't remember if it was like right after, or maybe a couple days after, but I noticed you got involved in the whole thing. Talk about. I mean, I want to go. I guess I don't know. I guess we should probably give the overview of what's going on first. But while you're giving the overview, what happened there, just talk about how you even got involved in it, why you wanted to get involved in it. I mean,
Mm.
there's scandals in poker every week, right? There's a new scandal every week, like Elio Lazara, and that's like there's always scandals. There's more scandals you can get involved with. So, what was it about this scandal that got you involved in it? That was personal for you, and why? Give people, while you're talking about that, give people an overview about what's going on for people that maybe don't know and don't have the background.
Yeah, I wasn't even really involved in it, but it came on my radar because I'm on Instagram, and my Instagram page kind of blew up in getting a bunch of followers. So I was kind of, I follow some poker people on there, and I've been on Instagram more recently. And I was looking at New York Poker King, and he's like running his like online poker room, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And he's got one of the biggest poker followings. He's got like 45,000 followers or something. And I'm just like looking at the thing he's promoting, and I'm like, this guy's running an online poker room out of his basement. Like, this is some like fly by night stuff. So once I kind of like saw it, I was like, whoa, like this is a recipe for disaster. So I just shared my thoughts on it, like not trying to be malicious, not trying to attack people. I'm just like, yo, you've got to be careful if you're doing this stuff, just because even if it's not a non NYPK that does anything malicious, it could be like random Joe Schmo that's handling the money. It could be so many things. So I just put out just a Instagram post. I was like, hey, you guys should be careful on this. And he like, of course, went bonkers and thought I was trying to accuse him of, I don't know, stealing national treasure or something. But he went kind of nuts. And this was about a year and a half ago. And I kind of just left it at that. I was like, hey, be careful, whatever. And then sure enough, over the last year and a half, I've had probably like 4 or 5 people message me and say like, hey, they're not paying me. And I'll message him and I'll be like, hey, what's going on with this? And the person ends up getting paid. And I really just didn't think much of it. I'm still like, this is going to go badly probably, but whatever. And sure enough, I've 2 guys recently messaged me a couple months ago at this point. One of them owed 40,000, one of them owed 20,000. They're not paying. And I reached out to him again and I was like, hey, what's going on with this? And he, kind of gives us a runaround and I give him 3 weeks to respond. And then I'm finally like, okay, I'm just going to break the story and like warn everyone that you're not paying out, allegedly. And so I did. And that's kind of where we stand. It seems that from that point on, so those guys wrote about 60,000. I've had multiple people message me. It seems like outstanding balances are more like 100K plus. And I have serious doubts that any of them are going to get paid. So there's a massive amount of money outstanding. There's also other clubs like Cadillac Club that have exit scammed for tens of thousands or more. It's just crappy because we don't have many good options for US poker players. So to see these unregulated ones that people are like running out of their basement, man, it's just people are going to get hurt, and seems to be what happened.
So, and if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but the New York Poker King guy, he's got kind of a history, right? Like he's not like somebody with a reputable reputation in the industry that's known to be like trusted. Like this is a guy that's had some issues before, possibly even some scams and like felonies and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't think he's defined by his criminal record, but he
No,
does.
fair enough, fair enough.
We. So here's the thing. Like, we can get into spiritual talk about this. Like, I'm not gonna hold it against him, but I'm also not gonna like have amnesia that he didn't have. He had grand larceny, a felony for grand larceny, where he like scammed an old couple, I think, out of like $20,000. So while that doesn't define him, but we should still like be wise and be
Right, like
keep
it
that in
doesn't
mind.
define how I look at him as a person, but if I'm gonna get in a business opportunity with somebody, it's probably a red flag.
Yes, I agree.
um, so PGT asked he's wondering how much of it has to do with BTC on a downswing, and some of the rooms were holding deposits in BTC and now don't have enough to pay out.
Gosh, I mean that's possible. I've heard people say the same thing about America's Card Room, like, oh, they're gonna go bankrupt because they take BTC. I have no idea. That's definitely possible. I mean, it's more possible. Like a big company like America's Card Room, you would think they'd be smart enough to just liquidate assets when they get them in crypto. But I guess yeah, one dumb poker player can make that mistake much easier. So possibly.
And I think I could be wrong, but America's Card Room is actually using a exchange for all their stuff, and that's why they're able to accept, I don't know, what is it, like 43 different cryptocurrencies, because they're going through a third party. So I'm pretty sure they're probably not actually
So
holding.
they probably use like Shapeshift and then just
Right.
immediately go to US dollar.
Right. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue with them. I can't say that for the other sites. I don't know, but um, that I'm pretty sure. Bobby was asked if you and I have ever played together. I don't. What is your name on ACR?
So I have two names. One is Bianchi, Beonkey, after my last name. And then my other one is Lord Voldemort.
I don't. To be honest, I don't know if we have. I'll have to check here in PT4. While I'm taking a little peeksy here, what is the draw to these PPP clubs? Like, why are people coming to them? Why are people putting so much money into them? Like, what? I mean, ACR, they're not. I wouldn't say they're reputable, but they're on the scale, right? They're
Mm.
higher up on the scale, and people are leery of having $2,000 on ACR because of various things, the bots, like you mentioned, the fears about BTC and whatnot. So like how does a Chinese poker app lead to people having 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 on it?
Well, it's like a home game. So the good things about a home game are you don't have the constraints of a casino, meaning that like it is nice to be able to go to the person running the game and be like, "Hey man, you know I'm good for the money. Can you loan me $500?" They're like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And that's a cool thing that a casino is not going to be like, "Oh, it's Chase. I see him all the time. Just give him $500." Um, so that's nice. You also have poker games that are usually softer, less pros in the games. Um, so yeah, it just doesn't have the stuff to bog it down like other poker games might. But obviously, with our example of lending a guy $500, well, now if he doesn't pay, like there's a reason those things are in place in a casino. Casino has security, so there's some definite drawbacks. The reason it's popular is because it's accessible, and the games are usually good.
Yeah, one of the things I always like to talk about is the cost of doing business. Like I've had to run some businesses, especially in between Black Friday and now, and like there's just a cost of doing business. And so when somebody comes along and offers you a rate that you've never seen before, chances are they're cutting into the cost of doing business, right? And so like when you get no rake or you get free loans, you have to start asking yourself, like you said, like, are people watching for collusion? Are they watching for chip dumping? Are they watching for all of those things? And the answer is probably not. Which definitely adds some risk. I assume that there is some sort of player base they're tapping into through Asia or something that is making the game soft, or like.
So I don't even think that's the case for at least for PPP poker. They're essentially just hosting games, so they're tapping into like social media. For instance, Adon has 45,000 Instagram followers. Most of those are not like seasoned poker players, so he's really tapping into like a more recreational market, which I think makes his game soft. And although I think PPP poker is like an Asian or Chinese app, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Right, but the operators, they essentially start their own club on it. So it's kind of like everything's ring fenced into like your club, this club. Clubs can like join together, but you're not like playing against an entire player pool.
Gotcha.
So it really is very similar to a home game
Right.
and runs into the same issues that a home game has, like getting robbed, getting the person run with the money, not paying player. If you're playing on credit, you're forced to play on credit. A lot of home games you can play cash plays. People, if you don't have the cash, then you can't play. But in this version of a home game, everyone's playing on credit and everyone's relying on the same person to pay them. So those are the risks, and the risks are high.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like we don't have a precedent in online poker for things going south, right? Like, I mean, these things have happened over and over again, and it's unfortunate because I think these are the kinds of stories that give poker a black eye and give politicians and other people the liberty to say, "Oh, this is bad. We can't have it," and they don't understand that, like, they're that part of the reason this exists is because they're not doing their part and they're not creating
Right.
a safe environment. Here in Illinois, I always find it funny that like online poker is not legal here yet in Illinois, but I can walk literally a block to my gas station and play a slot machine. It's like there's just no logic to it whatsoever, and other than
Right.
people with money are making the decisions and padding their pockets and everything else, and so it's frustrating. You said you lived in Washington for a while. Matt Moreland wanted to know what your thoughts were on online poker there and why they were so strict compared to other states.
So, state of Washington is one of the few that has actually explicitly passed a law to make the act of playing online poker legal. They made it a felony of all things. Like they put it up there with like child molesting. I mean, it's like they took a very, very severe stance against it. And it's so silly because they haven't prosecuted a single person for it. But it's one of the few states where a lot of these, even like semi-regulated places like ACR, they just don't want to deal with, I think, because of that. And whereas everywhere else in the nation, almost everywhere, it's not illegal to play poker. Really what they did with like UIGA and stuff is they went after financial institutions. There's very few places where it's actually illegal to play poker. Might be illegal to operate a game, might be illegal to profit from rake, etc. But Washington is one of the few states where it's actually illegal to participate in online poker. And I don't know why. It was just silly.
More politician stuff. We could probably go see. We could have gone into the politics conversation, Chase. We could have covered all this. It would have been great. We would have like lost half of our viewership and everything else. But so you said you got two accounts on ACR. So you've played a little bit on ACR. Have you played on any of the other online sites, or is that the only site you played on?
I did play on Ignition for a while, but they don't let you play from Maryland, the state of Maryland, where I'm in. I think ACR is actually like limits people from Maryland as well. Like if you don't already have an account, I don't think you can play from here either. But no, I mean, there's not many options. I've tried Ignition. Can't play on there. I haven't played on Global. I don't know. It seems silly, the whole sweepstakes things, but I would be willing to try it. I don't think they have very much action, do they?
The cash games are really, really soft, but probably not at levels that would super excite you. I mean, like they've got some really juicy 1-2, 2-4 games. Like if you wanted to play 2-4 online, I've made money at 2-4 on Global, so that'll tell you. Like it's like I would go in and just short stack it. I'd come in for 20-30 bigs and double within 5 or 10 minutes and then just spin it up from there type thing. So they do have some action. The reason I ask is like I think what would be cool to hear, we talk about PPP and we're talking about the poker landscape and all these things kind of coming together, like rather than just say like this is good, this is bad, this is really bad, this is super dangerous. Walk through your thought process and your risk assessment when you decide to put money on whether it's an online poker site or maybe you hear about a home game in Boston. Like what is your thought process? How do you decide what to risk, how to risk, like just kind of walk through like how you make those decisions, in terms of all that, like what.
Okay. Yeah. So I think if you have a reasonable like live poker option, that should probably be your primary choice, in my opinion. I mean, it's going to depend from person to person. If you have to play online or you just really want to play online, I would suggest at least giving a shot to the bigger and more reputable online poker rooms that have been around for years, pay people, etc., like America's Card Room, Ignition, etc. I guess Global's been around. I don't know how long they've been around, but they seem fairly reputable. Oh, excuse me, I had to cough. So I would recommend those are the safest. Now, there are trade-offs. The games aren't going to be as good as, say, a lot of clubs on like PPP Poker or these apps or whatever, or home games. But, the risk is a lot higher. If you are going to go with one of these app home game things, then I think you should make sure that the person you're working with is very reputable. There's like club operators, and then there's like your player rep. And I guess both are very important. I'm not too familiar with it. Joe Ingram actually did a really good video on the unregulated poker scene. I'd recommend you check that out. But I always tell people, if you are going to go on one of these shadier options, whether that be like an America's Card Room or a PPP club, keep as little as you can on there. Keep a working bankroll, and that's it. That, of course, like one of the guys that approached me that's owed 40,000, he's like, yeah, I deposited $500 and I was running it up faster than they could pay me. I was like, there's only so much you can do in terms of keeping a minimal bankroll there. So, and just know the risk going in. It's not your fault if you get scammed, but you you better know from the outset that it's a possibility.
Well, there's a huge difference between depositing 500, running it up to 40 grand, and I assume he got more than 500 off at least, and
Right.
like dropping 10 grand on one of those sites and then losing it, like never, never seeing a dime of it type thing. So you can definitely factor that into your assessment. Real quick, Joe asks, where in Maryland you are. He grew up in Waldorf.
I'm currently in PG County. I was up in Columbia for a while until MGM opened. Once MGM opened, I moved down to PG County to be closer.
Nice. So while we're on the topic of risk assessment, I know like when I first started following you on Twitter, you were like big into the cryptos, and I was like, I actually had my notifications on for you because I was always looking for what your kind of look and read was on things. Not that you were like the fortune teller for crypto. I mean, crypto is fairly unpredictable, but there's a lot of stuff out there, and I trusted
Mm.
your opinion more than other people's. And then, of course, we had this huge like with Bitcoin and all the other alts, and I haven't seen you talking about it as much. Like, where are you kind of in the crypto world today? And especially, like, I'd like to hear your general thoughts on crypto, and then specifically for poker players who are trying to what do I want to say? Not have all their eggs in one basket, right? Like you've got bankroll that you want to keep in your bank, but it's hard to move to crypto, and then
Mhm.
you've got some bankroll you're keeping in crypto, but you don't want it to tank, and then you've got some bankroll on these online sites, but you don't want to keep too much there. Like, how kind of give us your overview of crypto, and then like go into like how much you trust Bitcoin these days, and what would you recommend for someone that maybe has a 5K poker bankroll in terms of how much they should keep in crypto versus keeping on the sites and whatnot.
Well, the question of how much do I trust Bitcoin is 100% because I trust math. How much do I trust the price of Bitcoin? I have no idea
Fair
because
point.
I'm not good at trading. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, my view of crypto is like it's an investment. I'm not a trader. I mostly just like looked for good projects, and I haven't really been on the crypto grind lately. For a while, I was trying to find like good up and coming crypto projects that were, I think, utilizing the blockchain well. So I've got my couple that I thought were good, and I'm kind of just sitting on them and hoping that I'm like around break even right now on my investments, which of course I have. Like looking back, I'm like, I could have had a lot more money right now.
Right.
um,
Break
yeah,
even's pretty good, honestly, for everything that's happened.
yeah, considering. Luckily I got in early enough that I'm still break even. But I don't know. I mean, if you're good at like timing markets and whatnot, and in trading, then sure, I guess go for it. But I would say keep if you're a poker player and you want to give yourself some high risk, like maybe expose yourself to like 1 to 10% of your portfolio in crypto. Um, or I don't know, like I don't have a regular stock portfolio. I just have like crypto, my bankroll, and my savings account. So
Right.
I don't know. I'm probably one of the worst people to ask for like financial advice. I'm terrible. Like,
Well, it's not even like so much financial advice. It's just more like again, like your thought process behind like assessing. Like if you had 5K, let's just pretend you had 5K on ACR. I don't know what you have on ACR. I don't need to know what you have. Let's pretend you had 5K on ACR,
5K.
right? Like, would you consider taking half of that and putting it in? Would you trust your money more on ACR or Bitcoin? Like, would you at the end of the day would you try and split it 2,500, 2,500, or would you leave it all in or would you leave everything in Bitcoin? And just move it back on if you needed to, if you saw any imminent things. Like, how would you approach that?
So by trust it, what do you mean?
Well, like, so I don't know. I having gone through Black Friday myself, which let's see, you're 31. How old were you when Black Friday happened? You were
I remember I was in Oregon and I think I was
23, 22.
yeah, not even. I think I was like 21.
So did it affect you at all? Were
Yeah.
you okay? All right. So like, I have this horrible, horrible, horrible nightmare. Like, it was awful for me. It was life changing. So no matter how much I trust a site, there's always this part of me that's like doesn't trust it. Like, I just like I'm always leery, and so a lot of times when I'm looking at bankroll, like I'm trying to spread it out amongst all the sites. I'm trying to spread some in Bitcoin. I'm trying to keep some offline. Like, I'm trying to diversify as much as possible because I don't want any one site going down to screw me. Um,
Right.
so when I'm talking about trust, it's like you have to have your money somewhere. right? If you have a 5K bankroll, you got to have it somewhere.
Hmm.
You know, when you're looking at the risk of keeping it on an ACR or keeping it on an ignition or keeping it in Bitcoin, you know, like how do you decide what, you know, which is the better or safer option in terms of risk reward?
Well, I mean, the safest option is to keep it in your U.S. bank account that's insured by the government.
Sure.
The government's got the lowest chance of going under. That's for
Valid
sure.
point.
But Bitcoin exists because it is trustless, because it is secure. As long as you're securing your private keys, Bitcoin is like the ultimate answer for this kind of stuff. That's essentially what it was designed to do. It is safe. It is secure. The poker site can go under, and they will not have my Bitcoin as long as I have my private keys. So yeah, Bitcoin is like the perfect solution, especially if you need to have access to that funds and like easily put it back on a poker site or whatever, or move it back and forth, or send it to a friend. Like Bitcoin that's essentially what it was created to do. So yeah, I would keep it in Bitcoin. Why not? As long as you secure your keys and don't lose them, you're good.
Yeah, yeah. There's been plenty of mistakes on that front too, from what I hear from people, and I mean, hopefully, I feel like there's gonna be a second rise. I don't know if it'll be as exciting or as intense as the first one is, but I don't feel like it's completely dead. Um, and I hope it doesn't ever go completely dead, because then, like, I mean, again, like that's gonna take online poker to a whole nother realm. You know, if Bitcoin goes down to like $10 or $15 a Bitcoin, it's gonna make it very unviable for online poker in our current, in the current state that it's in. But I don't know. It's
Yeah,
weird.
I would push back against that. I think online poker has very little to do with Bitcoin other than a payment processor sort of thing. I mean, maybe a lot of the poker community has more exposure than average to Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So like it might hurt the economy, but I don't think it's really like integral to online poker. Are you saying
Well,
in terms of like deposits?
somebody has to get screwed, right? Like if it's not the poker sites that get screwed, then it's going to be the exchanges that get screwed. But somebody goes out of business. If Bitcoin goes down to 15, 20, $30 a Bitcoin, somewhere between us and the poker site is going to be in trouble, because they're holding all of this Bitcoin that's going to lose all of this value. Um,
Well, like we were talking about, it's very plausible that America's Card Room, when they get a Bitcoin deposit,
right.
they just send it to like Shapeshift and turn it into US dollars or USDT or whatever, like some
Yeah, the
stable
tender.
coin. Sure. So, it probably, if they're not holding it, no one's going to get screwed. Like if simply it goes into the market, whoever bought it is going to be the one that's screwed. But it's not necessary that it's directly tied to like somewhere in the between us and the poker room. It very well could be they liquidated it on their end, we liquidated it on our end. But certainly, whoever's holding Bitcoin, like I said, if a lot of poker players have it, it's going to hurt the economy a little bit. But
Right. Um, so I got one more topic for you. I want to hear your thoughts on. Talk to me about your inner circle. Like, talk to me about friends in poker. Obviously, the people you surround yourself with is important. And one of my valuable lessons for 2018 was like, you gotta be very careful who you surround yourself with. Like, how have you kind of in this industry decided who to align with, who to spend time with, who to keep in that inner circle, and how valuable has that been to your success?
hmm, really good question. So I think I have a couple different inner circles, so to speak. So I have my like poker inner circle, which is like my study group, which there's probably what I guess like seven of us ish, six of us, that we just have a chat group that will post hands, we'll talk about them, we'll give advice, we'll say like, I would have done this for these reasons, blah blah blah. Oh, excuse me. So that's kind of like my poker study group, inner group. And then I have like more of like outside of poker, I guess like my faith group, my support group. I have my wife. I have a lot of support outside of poker that very much impacts my poker playing. And they're very important. I'm finding more and more the value of community, Christian community, non-Christian community. I and then also I have a sort of like inner group of like poker players that I know, friends in the poker scene. Um, people like when I was at Borgata last week, there was like 18 of us of poker like tournament regs that we played it like werewolf after a long day of poker, and it was awesome, and we had a really good time. And that was a good time to be in community, to not be lonely on the road. So yeah, I think there's different roles for different people. You're going to find your different sport in different ways. But a community is really important, and I'm finding more and more how important community can be.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You talked at before we hopped on the stream. You were talking about how it's all downhill after 25. When you look at your poker career, what you've already accomplished, what you want to continue accomplishing, like what's the end game for you? You know, if you're 75 and retired from poker, if that's even a thing, I kind of question whether any of us will ever retire from poker. But you know, like, what do you want to look back on at 75 and say, this is what I accomplished? This is what are you hoping your poker career looks like at that point?
Hmm. Yeah, so I hope my poker career is going to be a couple things. I hope I'm going to be successful financially. I hope that I'm a winning player for a long time, that I make good decisions, that I protect my bankroll, and I'm able to have a long and good career in poker. Um, I don't know how long exactly I want that to be, but we'll find out. I also want to glorify God. I mean, that's like number one priority, really. So yeah, I want to honor God in how I conduct myself in poker, how I treat people. I want to have, yeah, a legacy of knowing Christ and reflecting Him to my peers. And then I want to provide for my wife, provide for my family. I want to be a good influence. Yeah, I don't really. Those are some kind of vague things. Eventually, I want to get out of poker, or at least when I say get out of poker, I mean like now I can play 1 or 2 days a week for fun, sort of thing. That is getting out of poker for me. I think if I did that, I'd probably retire and maybe like volunteer more at church or something, get a part-time gig at church serving. So that's kind of like my long-term, not so cleared vision.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, it's really cool. I think that it's fun to be in a point where you can just kind of freely do that and give back and not have all the other pressures on you. And also, I think those of us that have played poker professionally know that when there isn't the constraints of needing to provide for family and everything, there's a lot more fun in the game, right? There's always this pressure, like when you're doing it to again, like be at a certain level and bring in a certain amount of income and again protecting the bankroll and everything, and it can become a job. It can very much become
Oh yeah.
work like anything else. And so the idea of playing just for fun is a intriguing one. I don't know how practical it is for a guy like me, but because I also have this, like, I'm one of those really competitive driven people, and so like I always want to compete in something. I can't physically compete in near as many things as I could when I was in my 20s. So this is kind of like hitting, a couple different, it's killing a couple different birds with one stone, so to speak. Quiet, Bubby. Yeah, I don't know how feasible that playing for fun thing is for me, but I like the concept of it. Follow-up question: you talked about protecting your bankroll. And bankroll management's been kind of an interesting topic on this stream. I actually have a video on my training site where we kind of go into bankroll management, and we take it much deeper than just you got to have 200 buy-ins at whatever tournament level you're playing or whatever. Like, how do you approach bankroll management? You obviously, like so many of us, because I've made similar mistakes, started out with no bankroll management, right? Learned some very, very
Sure.
painful lessons early on. Now you've had, 12, 13 years of experience with it. You also, you've brought up things like taking shots. So I'd love to hear kind of your general philosophy, and then like, again, like specifically with like shot taking and when, like, I'd like to hear kind of your philosophies on both.
For sure. So for instance, when I was younger, I had no responsibilities. Like I was a single guy. Uh, I had a cheap apartment and like I didn't have a career job. I just was dealing at a casino. Like I had very little to lose. I could take shots. I could put my entire bankroll in if there's a really good 5-10 game and I normally played 1-2, like why not play 5-10? Like what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to work another shift tomorrow. Like it's yeah, it wasn't a big deal back then. And I think if you're like really young and have very little to lose, yeah, be really aggressive with your bankroll. On the other side, if you're 45 years old and you got a career job and like pension and like all this other stuff that you'd have to leave to pursue poker, man, you better have some darn good reasons for doing that. And you got a wife to provide for, you got kids, like it's going to depend a lot with different people, and you better have a big bankroll to justify that. So, and me, I think I'm somewhere in the middle where, I can be somewhat aggressive and take shots. Certainly not rolled to be playing like 25, 50 plus on my own dime on the regular, but these games don't run very often. If I want to take a big piece of myself, if I'm playing 50, 100, I'll usually sell about a third to a half. But if I want to take a big piece of myself occasionally, it's okay. If I take a couple big hits, I'm probably not going to be able to play that big anymore, which is a bummer. But yeah, at this point, I just need to like make sure I don't go broke. It's a big thing. I learned when I was younger that the one way you can't make money in poker is when you don't have a bankroll. So I need to protect my bankroll and be able to provide for my family. So going broke isn't an option.
Do you have times where you step down in levels just to reduce pressure or to add to the fun or to like, take, I don't know, just to put yourself in a easier mindset?
Yeah, if I'm on a downswing, I'll definitely game select a lot stricter. So when I'm like, there's been times in the last couple years where like I'll just play the biggest game in the room because like I was on an upswing, I was playing really well. I thought I had a pretty good edge on the regs. Um, so yeah, there's times where I would just play the game regardless because I was like kind of in end boss mode where I was just like crushing everyone, and that's good and fine. But when I was on a downswing recently, I've been game selecting a little more heavily. Haven't been playing like 10-25 when if there's a good 5-10 and a mediocre 10-25. I've been more apt to play the 5-10. But yeah, I mean, if it went really bad, I'd move down to 2-5. I'd only shot take 10-25. I'd only, yeah. So you got to be willing to move down. That's part of protecting your bankroll.
Yeah, it's a lost art, and I think nowadays like the old school ways of just like X amount of buy-ins, even in cash games, right? Like just say I don't know what the rule of thumb was. It like 25 buy-ins or 50 or what? What's the general
No
rule of thumb?
idea.
Like there used to be a number. I don't remember what it is. But yeah, it's kind of out the window because there's so many dynamics that are changing, right? Like it's not like every 2-5 poker cash game is the same game, and it's not like every $100 tournament or $50 tournament or $20 tournament's the same thing. There's a huge difference between playing a $22 tournament that has 200 people in it and playing a $22 50K on a Sunday, right? Where there's 2,500
Right.
people. The variance changes dramatically. And I don't think there's enough conversation about the confidence level, like protecting your confidence and keeping not just your bankroll, but your confidence in a place where you're safe and you're balanced and your confidence
Hmm.
isn't swinging. Because if there's one thing that this game will do is it will take your confidence to levels it shouldn't be at the top, where we get overconfident, and levels it shouldn't be at the bottom, where we just completely lose confidence and feel like we don't have anything to offer. So,
Totally.
I think it's really really important. I'm just gonna follow up on any last questions in chat here. So if you guys have any questions, get them in now. Let's see. Blazer08 wanted to know if you knew any players that had their money stuck in full tilt when it was shut down.
Yeah, yeah. Quite a few friends. One of them specifically, I'm thinking of, had around 80-90% of his net worth on there. I mean, it really
Wow.
yeah, it really screwed up his life for a couple of years. Feel really bad for him. He's back on his feet now, but that really messed him up.
Yeah, it was really fortunate. Like I had more money on Poker Stars than I did Full Tilt, so that at least helped. But I was playing 100% backed back then. Like everything I did was backed, and so like the investor money just went. You know, nobody had money to invest, and so playing live, playing online, just completely went away. Go ahead, Wals. I'll ask your question, buddy. While Wasal's getting his question in, are there any other thoughts you have on PPP poker or anything else you want to kind of say or get
Man,
out there?
I would just stay off of those sites if at all possible. I It's just bad news. It seems to inevitably end in bad things. So just stay away from it would be my advice. I understand some people, that's one of their few options. So let's go into it knowing that it could go badly. And it seems like it, more often than not, it eventually does.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
for sure. What's the next live tournament you think you're gonna play at?
I'm not really planning on traveling much anytime soon, but I think there's a WPT that's coming to my local card room at Maryland Live. So probably that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I also wanted to know when you think a cash player should take a shot at like moving up in stakes. Like, what you think your thought process is for that?
So I think you should be able to beat the level that you're moving up from over a big sample. Like a consistent sample. Say you're a 1-2 player and you want to take a shot at 2-5. Or let's say you have been playing 2-5 for a while. You were playing 1-2. Now you're playing 2-5 for a while, and you're like wanting to shot take 5-10. Well, like, have you how long you've been beating 2-5 for like 100 hours? 100 hours isn't really anything. It's like a couple weeks of like playing full time. That's really not much. So I'd say get a couple 100 hours in where you're a consistent winner in whatever game you're at. And yeah, I mean, bankroll questions are really they depend on you. If you play recreationally and you get $1,000 a month to play with, I mean, sure, go for it.
Right.
Put $1,000 on if that's the only time you're going to play that month.
Oh, High Hands just showed up. He asked
Yeah,
if this
what
is
up,
for
Gail?
real money. Oh my goodness, good times, man. High Hands, I wish you'd have been here like an hour and a half ago, bro. Good to see you. I've been battling with him on the BOL streets like nonstop this last few weeks. Um, cool. Well, listen, Chase, I really appreciate you coming on. I've wanted to have you on here for a long time. And it's been really cool that getting to see you on PCA and some of these other places. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where things go. Definitely let me know if when you get that podcast up, we'll help get word out on it. That's the one thing I hear more from anybody. Like when I told people that you were coming on, is everybody says the same thing. I love the podcast. I love the podcast. Like that's been kind of a consistent thing. So I'm sure it's going to be really popular. Having you bring it back, and look forward to seeing some future things.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. It was
All
fun
right.
to be on, dude.
Absolutely, man. Well, I will talk soon, and if it's okay, I'll throw this on YouTube and get this out there, and I'll let you know when it's up there, and you can use that to do that. Oh, real quick, Ian wants to know if you're playing the WSOP 50th chase.
What? Oh, the 50, is that like the 40K buy-in or something?
I think that's the $500 like
Oh, the
$5 million
$500? Nah. I'm probably just going for the main event this year. Like I said, probably going to be moving at that time and not looking to go to Vegas too much. So probably just playing the main event next year.
All right, man. Well, best of luck with the move, and keep doing what you're doing, man. It's working.
Cool. Thanks,
All right,
bro.
buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, later.
All right, that was Chase Bianchi. I super appreciate him coming on and being with us. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. We're going to be doing this maybe not once a week. Like, we're going to try to go once a week or once every 2 weeks. We're going to be bringing in all kinds of different guests, big guests, small guests, new streamers, longtime streamers. But we just want to connect you to people, get to hear their story, get to hear how they got into poker, and let them talk a little bit about their passions and what they're excited about. And Chase did a great job with the stuff with the PPP, and obviously he's been really high profile as of late. Got to be on the feature table at the PCA, so really generous of him to come on and spend some time with us. We're gonna kick over the host to Air Egyptian and send some love over there. So please say hi, wish him luck, throw some team PPs in chat. We'll be back on stream tomorrow afternoon, playing some poker, grinding, and bringing in some people for Killing Bird's home game. So hope you guys are doing well. Thank you again so much for being here, and we will see you guys soon.